to a new narrative. I am back with a very special guest today, a guest that I found on Instagram. I found her through my ballet work, and what really grabbed me was the name Carnivore Ballerina. Now, at first, it grabbed me because it really implied two things, what she likes to eat and what she likes to do. But I was very curious about how the what she likes to eat came along. So I started, creep stalking her content. I absorbed quite a bit of it. And after a while, I figured she's got to be a first color determination. Can I ask, will she give me permission to look? Am I going to find out I'm right? So it turns out Olyveya is a first color determination. She's alternating determination. So she has accepted my request to come on the show, and we're going to talk about how she figured it out. So, welcome to a new narrative, Olyveya.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Okay, so let's start with a couple basic questions because a lot of the audience is just going to hear your voice. So, how old are you?
I'm 20 years old.
Okay, that was part of the thing that was really exciting for me about this. You're quite young to have figured this out, and part of what I'm saying here is you weren't one of the people that had to wait until like a midlife autoimmune disease condition hit them, and yet I actually think that you got hit with something pretty aggressive at a pretty young point, right?
Yeah, yeah.
What happened to you?
Good question. Good question. Yeah, a bunch of different things happened. So to sum it all up, essentially what happened was I got SIRS, which is known as chronic inflammatory response syndrome, and that can happen to an exposure of chemicals, toxins, whatever it is. So I had exposure to mold, so I had mold poisoning, and then I also had parasites, and then heavy metals as well. So all three of those combined caused extreme damage to my body because of the inflammation. So that's essentially like the root of it, and summed up, that's what it was.
Now, did each one of those things had clearly different symptoms so you could easily identify how many problems there were?
Yeah, the heavy metals kind of goes hand in hand with the parasites. So I've learned after researching myself that if you have parasites, most likely you have heavy metals and vice versa. The mold poisoning or exposure was slightly different in that I was a lot more depressed when I was so I had depression obviously when I was exposed to mold, and it kind of stayed until I finally detoxed from it. And it just also gave me a lot worse mental clarity. So I couldn't think. It's just like my brain just stopped working when I was in a moldy environment, which was unfortunately for too long of a time. And then yeah, I was just chronic fatigue. So it was more so just like depression and heaviness on me. And then parasites was also depression, but somehow it was slightly different. I could rationalize why I was feeling certain ways with parasites compared to the mold.
Okay, so a lot of this sounds like it's environmental conditioning. How much of what went wrong was from what you were like actually ingesting in food, just food? I know we ingest a lot of things a lot of different ways, but just food. What was contributing to what didn't feel good?
Yeah, so I actually wasn't eating anything terrible. I was brought up eating a whole foods kind of paleo diet, which is supposed to be pretty healthy, especially since everything was non-GMO, organic, and all that. It's just when I got exposed to these different toxins that I was, yeah, very heavily impacted. So everyone's very different. Some people don't really feel it, like my classmates, because where I was exposed was my ballet school. Some of my classmates were perfectly fine. Some of them you could tell, now looking back, I can tell that clearly some of them had issues similar to me. But I think it's just how you're impacted individually. So I also think, and you got into this very, very briefly on the Instagram story that you took right now, there's also a metaphysical and emotional aspect as to why you would be more exposed or why you would get a bigger reaction to something just based off of your own personal, I guess, like trauma, let's say.
This is curious. Do you want to tell me more about that?
Sure. So my main issue, and I'm still very conscious about it because it was my biggest insecurity, was weight gain, obviously, but specifically my thighs. And this is for a lot of dancers just because they always talk about your thighs have to be thin or whatever. But then I was looking at Louise Hay, who has a whole book and then list of different health conditions based off of your metaphysical health and then what they can mean. So your thighs is specifically suppressed rage or anger from your childhood, specifically at your father, which was very true for me. And then this also went in line with any time that I had a hip injury, an ankle injury, my skin conditions. Anytime that I felt something, I would read it and I would think, ah, yes. And parasites was like giving your power. So you literally have a parasite sucking off of you, and then you would be more susceptible. And that was very true in the circumstances that I was in. So I think it has to do with that as well as to why you get certain illnesses.
Very cool. Okay, so when you started to change things around you, so it sounds like mold was like a very obvious one that you needed to deal with. We had some clear symptoms. How did you decide? Because there's so much information out there. How did you decide what information you would follow, or what things you would eliminate, or what things you would try? What was your process like?
Yeah, so I originally I didn't know that I was as ill as I was. I just thought I was large. So I just asked my mom what's a good because I was already following a pretty low carb diet, but I just said, okay, what can I do? Because I just reached a point when I was 15, I think. Yeah, it was no, sorry, 16. And I just said, okay, what can I do to lose weight? And she said, well, you can try the Atkins diet, which now would be like a ketogenic diet. So then I did that for roughly 2 weeks. And then because I was doing it and watching a lot of videos on it, even though all of it was just going through my head because I wasn't thinking clearly at the time because of the mold exposure. Actually started to get carnivore diet recommended on my YouTube channel. And I thought, oh, well, that sounds cool. So then I ended up trying that for a month, but I didn't educate myself well enough on it. So I wasn't consuming enough of certain proteins and fats or like real, just pure meat. It was a lot of processed things. So I was getting worse. And then I ended up sticking with like an animal-based diet up until January of 2022. I went to a ballet company and they said, yeah, I was too large. And I thought, okay, I have to do something. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try carnivore again, but this time I'm going to stick properly to it and learn what I did wrong. So then I found Michaela Peterson and I thought a lot of her symptoms were similar. And I thought, well, maybe I just didn't have those symptoms. It was kind of in my head, but she lost a lot of weight and inflammation. So it could work for me. Then I realized I think it was like 6 months after doing the diet, I still was getting breakouts in my skin because that was another huge thing for me that there had to be something else happening if I'm doing carnivore diet and I'm still getting breakouts because it would mean that something is wrong in my gut. Whereas after 3 months on the carnivore diet, your gut should kind of be reset at that point. And then I was looking into my past, what was I exposed to, looking at old photos. We were already doing some urine and blood tests, and then I realized it was, yeah, parasites, the mold exposure, and then the heavy metals. So then yeah, from there, I then did more detoxes and stuck to the carnivore diet.
So, okay, so you had your own, like a self-diagnosis that was validated and accurate.
Essentially, yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, now I'm very curious about what's the difference between like how the carnivore diet is recommended to you and what are elements that are like more specific or personal or differentiated for you? Like, are there things that are recommended that don't work for you or things that you would swap in that work better for you?
Yeah, so when I first went on the diet, it was a lot of processed meats because I was traveling through Bulgaria. I'm all over the place in my life. And we couldn't find good quality like grass-fed beef because I always did better with that. I feel bad if I eat grain-fed or if it has any other additives to it. It was very expensive, so the only grass-fed that was reasonably priced was just sausage. So then I was consuming a lot of that for I think it was like a good almost 2 months and that wasn't working for me. So then um in 2022 I was in Serbia and it's quite inexpensive there. You can find good quality meat. So then I was able to stick with meat and a lot of animal fats, not so much butter because it wasn't quite so much high quality butter there. And that worked very well for me. And then yeah, I realized that I do better on ruminant animals. So not so much pork, especially not pork. I don't do so well with that and chicken, but yeah, sticking with like beef, lamb, and bison. And butter because I do love butter. But sticking with more so just like animal fats and purely the animal, and especially including organ meats such as liver, heart, and now I have a kidney, which I don't know what I'm doing with that, but yeah.
Okay, I venture into these places, but the part where I'm like, brain, I have not eaten anything's brain yet. I haven't gotten
Yeah.
there, but I had tongue for the first time the other day, and that was really
Oh, okay.
interesting. It was a beef tongue, and they
Mhm.
they scraped off like the taste bud bumpy part. And I will be honest, the texture of the tongue is very similar to liver. It's very chewy. It's a very strong muscle. Not my favorite, but it wasn't the worst. And I
Oh, okay. I
probably
haven't
like it.
tried it yet. Mhm.
Yeah. Like most people, I think we naturally like these things a lot more than other people do. Like if, I've eaten nothing but meatballs for a couple of days, and I think most people look at me with my three little meatballs and they're like, "Are you sick of those yet?" But they're so good. Like I can eat the same thing over and over and over and over without getting sick of it. Do you find
Mm.
that you can hit the same thing for a while before you phase out?
Yeah, there was, I think, a full month in maybe it was June where all I ate was burgers, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I was perfectly fine with it.
Was that when you came up with the cereal?
Yes, yeah, because it was just a different form of the ground beef. So I thought, well, I'm gonna have the cereal, and then for lunch I had burgers, and then for dinner I had burgers, and then the only reason why I switched was because I live with my mom, and she was getting so bored of it. So she must not be a one. She was getting so bored, but she's like, we gotta buy something else. I'm like, I'm happy, but yes, that was the only reason why I changed.
That's a little humorous. I'm kind of curious what your mom is. She's very supportive.
Yeah.
Okay, so have you found that it's been easier to either manage your weight or lose weight on the diet you're on now?
Yes, yeah, I've been finding it a lot easier to manage my weight and also just heal my relationship with food and also myself because staring at a mirror for like 4 hours a day isn't great for your mental image. So yes, it's been great for that.
What would you consider your activity level in terms of how much you need to take in?
Yeah, I don't think it's so much. I think if I wasn't consuming such nutrient dense foods, I would have to be consuming a lot more. So I roughly eat around a pound of meat a day, and then that's excluding fat. So then I would have probably uh like a whole cup of fats added to that. So it's roughly like a pound and a cup of fat, I guess, would be
What
like
kind
total
of
intake.
what kind of fats do you like other than butter?
Uh yeah, other than butter, it would just be beef tallow.
And what are you just using it for, like frying mostly?
Frying, or I'll just use it in place of butter.
Okay. Also, I would love for you to tell everybody about your collagen trick that you do to the burgers because I'm still working on perfecting that. It was too liquidy the first time and much too sticky the second time.
Yeah. Yeah, so what I found out with the collagen, it works a bit better if you're using gelatin powder. With the collagen powder, you need to get a really, really high heat, and there needs to be a lot of really already hot fat in the pan, and you just pour the collagen or gelatin powder on top, and then you flip over your burger, or I have a friend that does it with steak, and then it'll sizzle and make like a really nice crust, and then you scrape it off and flip it back over. Yeah.
Okay, I tried to eat some of the like crispy, like gelatin crackling things that were in there. I chewed them once. I had to like pick them out of my teeth with an object. I was like, this is like hardtack candy in there, but also so delicious.
Yeah, it's good. If it's too sticky, then it turns out like that and it's like kind of stuck there. But like if you can get it perfect, it's yeah, without that side effect.
Okay, I have so many questions. I want to move into some of the ballet stuff, which is totally like that's my personal obsession because I didn't start well, and I even feel like such a charlatan saying that I started ballet because I have never once been to a proper live class with other people in it. I can't get into a studio and there's not many offerings here. So I built my own studio and started taking it online with Ballet with Isabella. She's lovely. And from there, it's pretty much, I'm pretty sure I can do the warm up exercises for 2 to 3 years before I can ever actually do most of the combinations or any like I'm still trying to lift my leg over 90 degrees. So it's gonna be a while before I honestly I didn't realize how much extreme focus and effort and the fact that ballerinas look like they're doing next to nothing when they go across the stage, it's exactly what makes it so damn hard. And so I didn't start until 32. Now I laugh because your very first content was like, I started ballet late. And I'm like, she started at 16
Really?
and
Yeah.
20, you know?
Yeah.
But also, I do recognize in ballet, like that is late to start. So why did you wait so long? And then what made you go for it?
Yeah, so I actually started doing ballet when I was like, I guess 3. It was very recreational. So my understanding of like technique was first position. I was given a slice of plastic pizza. It was put in between my feet, and that was first position. That's not really a first position. It's like a really closed or a really open parallel. And that I didn't really understand anything for technique other than that up until the age of 7. And then I stopped doing ballet because we were living in the Middle East. And then we moved to South America, and we couldn't find anything in South America until I was 13 and a half, I think. And we finally found a studio. It was very recreational. I have some, yeah, videos, and that's probably the video that you saw, where I was dancing on point. I should not have been dancing on point. But I think what advanced me faster was during that time, even though I wasn't taking any ballet classes or even dance classes, I just asked my mom for a pair of point shoes on my, I think, 11th or 12th birthday, and I was just at home dancing in the point shoes, which is not safe at all, uh in my for like 2 hours at a time because I just loved it. I always loved ballet. And then at the studio when I was 13, I was cast as Aurora in Sleeping Beauty for whatever reason, even though there's so many other girls who were a lot better. I just, I guess, looked the part. And then I overheard one of these girls who was a lot better talking about a state ballet school. I had no idea that existed. Um, and she's like, "Oh, I want to audition again," because she had auditioned the previous year and didn't get in. And I heard audition. I'm like, I wonder, since I have a better casting role than her, I got a bit of an ego boost. If I could get into the school, like if I auditioned. So then I asked my mom, like, okay, I want to go audition. And I think because even when I was going to that studio, I still had zero understanding of technique. I didn't know what fifth position was. I didn't know what anything really was. We would go, we'd slap on point shoes and just kind of dance around. So it was very, very recreational. And for whatever reason at this audition, they decided to accept me. I think I really stared them down and I had a huge smile on my face. And I think what also really helped me was I looked very different because I'm blonde. I was a lot blonder then. I had blue eyes compared to I was in South America, so I don't really look like the Latinas there. And they're always, and they've said this many times to us, the teachers, that they always are looking for someone who looks different because it stands out more on stage. So I think that was initially what got me into the school. And I decided when I was going to that audition, if I got in, then I would pursue ballet professionally. And if I didn't, then I would just continue recreationally. And then I got in. It was not a good school. I still did not understand anything until I was 15. I went abroad for a summer course and I was told that I like had no future essentially and that I was too large. And that's where my whole plummet started of overworking and under eating and diet and everything. And then in 2020, when I was 17, I got a good half a year off, like most people. But what I did have was a summer course in that year of 2020 in July, and I met this teacher who was a Vaganova graduate. So that was not the style that I was doing. It was very different what I was doing from the Vaganova, which is now what I do. And then I had to restart with that teacher when I was 17, which was completely different. He was very prestigious of a teacher, pushed me very hard, but in the span of slightly less than a year, he was able to get me from like zero potential to actually pretty solid technique. So yeah, I do think you can get ahead pretty fast if you have the proper tools and you also approach it theoretically, not only just learning stuff and hardworking, but without any like proper understanding what you're doing.
How much time do you currently spend? Like, what's your average day amount of day that you're spending on this?
Yeah, so in the studio with the teacher, I spend roughly 2.5 hours, and then on my own, I'll spend an hour beforehand stretching and warming up and doing some of the exercises, and then at home before I even get there, I spend like another 45 minutes.
So you are making a go of this for a profession.
Yes.
Very cool. So what would you still like to accomplish?
I used to have really large goals. At this point, I don't really care. I went back to the real reason as to why I began dancing was I just loved watching it. There was some emotional aspect which really just caught me, and I just would like to perform that on stage wherever I can. So initially I thought, "Ooh, I love American Ballet Theater. That's such a huge company. I would love to dance there." Now I don't really care as long as I do get to share the art form anywhere.
It's okay. This is very cool because now I'm gonna do a little human design stuff for a second, but being a generator, you live life in response. And so basically whatever you're attracted to, pulled towards, gut response for, gravitating towards, these are clues about you have energy meant to be used on this thing. And so it's very interesting for me to talk about one, where your natural response came from, when it started, how many different ways you've responded to ballet throughout your life. Like it doesn't seem like a whim or an experiment or anything like that. It seems like you consistently have responded to doing this, but it was hard for you to be in the right place or circumstance to have access to what you needed. And now, I mean, you're still living with your mom. She's still supporting you, or not necessarily financially, but emotionally or whatever. She goes with you. She's your person.
Yeah.
Where are you in the world right now?
I'm in Utah in the US.
And is this where hey, are you mostly there?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm here for like roughly a year. Yeah.
Oh, in a ballet studio.
Yes,
School.
in a ballet studio. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, now do you find that the carnivore stuff kind of parallels this? Like, do you kind of go back and forth between what you like more, what you want to talk about more? What
Yeah, it has been. And I recently decided I'm going to switch my username because I don't want to be known as just for ballet and carnivore because it just seems a bit brutal because it's like meat. If you think of carnivore, you think of like raw meat and a lion, and then you have ballet, and it's kind of, yeah, odds. So I want to bring it more to actually talking about kind of this, which is like the emotional healing because I've had very traumatic experience, unfortunately, with my ballet teacher, which actually did get me to a good level. So I'd like to talk and share more of that and also my experience with starting later because I know that a lot of people have negative experiences in the ballet industry. So I'm trying to go towards that more.
okay. You just saying that kind of like, I mean, there was what I was very interested in talking about, but what you've kind of revealed to me is, given the platform, you have other things that you want to talk about more. So can we go there for a sec?
Yeah. Wait, what do you mean by like other things?
Well, you brought in the emotional component of things. And so it seems to me like, let's say the response is for ballet, and through the response to ballet, you go through these different experiences where the ballet studio gives you the mold poisoning. You feel like you want to lose weight. There are all these different ways in which food is coming in through the ballet conversation. All these different elements in your life are being like kind of exposed to you, and then the health is increasing. Like, ballet showed you the mold problem. You solving the mold problem led to the food. It's like you keep meeting the thing that you're going to have the response to that takes you to the next phase of the next thing that you're going to have a response to. And so where I met you isn't necessarily where you're aiming to go now or what you're currently having a response for. It sounds like there's definitely some direction towards mental and emotional health.
Yeah, yeah, it's a really weird because it's so, I guess, like diverse with all the different things that I kind of cover, but it's always going to be at the foundation of, yeah, ballet, which has led me along all of those different things, which is kind of also tied in with food and health.
Do you think that you're going to offer some kind of coaching work?
I offer ballet coaching. I did study so I took a course in psychology because I thought it would be good to do something with that, but it was not at all what I was hoping it would be. So I would like to do some form of coaching in that aspect. I'm just not sure where now. I've looked at a bunch of different places for studying that, and none of them really encompass, from my own experience, what I would like to experience from a coach. So, yeah, I'm not 100% sure on how I would do that.
I find this, yeah, okay, so this is where I start to I feel like a little frustrated on your behalf, actually, because the kind of coaching that I automatically seeing you do, I wouldn't want anybody else to tell you how to do that. It sounds like you're coming into this on your own and that you're learning something that needs to be brought into an arena. So I don't have an expectation that there is somebody like more advanced at what you want to do, better than what you want to do, that's going to teach you how to do what you want to do. I think, I mean, you've been on a few different interviews, you're online, like you're just naturally going to have people asking you if they can work with you. And I mean, as long as you don't have, if you're not like, I'm a counselor, well, then you're not locked into the legal ethical obligations. I mean, I guess if you want the thing on the wall that says, I can be a coach, but I don't necessarily think that you need to. And maybe it's wrong to even suggest that as like what we would call the thing. But no matter what, like I definitely see that you will be helping people in your network based on the experiences you've already been through. Like people are going to they're going to gravitate towards you because they share the same experience as you. What feels like not the effect you want to have, but like what kind of support would you like to offer to other people?
Well, this is kind of what ties into like why I initially started social media was when I was at my worst. I had a few like figures I would look up to, but I just felt too, I guess, like ashamed or embarrassed that I didn't feel like they were approachable for me to just message or to just talk about with like a very similar experience because a lot of people have experienced a few things, but there wasn't someone who experienced like everything that I experienced. Um, so yeah, that was initially why I started was I wanted to be someone who you could message for support or I could offer like counseling, but not quite counseling. So that would kind of be, I guess, like the reaction I would like is I'm approachable, you can message me and I can somehow help you.
Yeah, because I think like there are certain experiences you're going to have where when somebody wants to talk to somebody who can recognize what they've been through, like I'm not going to expect a regular therapist to know what it's like to be, well, I have not heard too many good stories about ballet teachers. Ballet teachers are like, they seem to be really, really hard on their students, really aggressive, really kind of dangerous. And I'm like, there are a lot of bad stories about. I'm just having a few realizations now. I'm like, man, ballerinas are freaking tenacious to
Yeah, and
have
for
to
the
deal with
yeah,
everything they have to deal with and then still want to be so beautiful and graceful and still put in as much work as they do. Like, I'm having a little moment of
yeah.
a few things converging at once.
Have you watched the movie The Red Shoes?
No?
Okay, it's a ballet movie. I think it's also a ballet. I'm not really into ballet movies. A lot of them I just find like really cringy. But this one, it's an amazing movie as a movie. Like even if you hate ballet, it's a great movie. And the guy who runs this company, I don't remember what his name is. It's a guy who runs like a ballet troupe and he hires this girl. I won't give it away because it's a great movie and you really need to watch it. But the guy who is running it, who's like the director, he is the embodiment of the teacher that I had and of the like extent of abuse that you can get from a ballet teacher, instructor, whatever it is. And I think like that's a great example of exactly what happens to a lot of people. Obviously, it's not everyone. The teacher that I have now, love her and she's amazing. She's very strict and very direct, but it's not in that negative form.
Okay, so when you say, like, I want a little context, and you can tell me you don't want to talk about it if you want to, but are we talking like using terrible language to try and teach you, or like physically manipulating your body in ways that are uncomfortable, or like what's the difference between an overly aggressive ballet teacher and a good direct one?
Yeah, so I think it can manifest in different forms. And I've, through experience with both, come to learn that I think psychological abuse is worse than physical abuse. And that was what was happening. So it's a lot of these passive comments and saying things. For example, the reason why I moved to the US, I was training with the teacher that I no longer train with, of course, in Croatia. I was training with this teacher who got me to this great level. And I completely understand where he's coming from. He was at the best ballet school in the world, which is the Vaganova school. So, of course, he was getting that treatment. So I think it's through your experience, you're just giving out the same thing. And that's where I think you need to heal a bit on yourself to not just filter that through you to someone else. Anyways, I was preparing for an audition and it was a grand audition. This has been happening more frequent where you go to one audition and there's like 5 different directors there instead of just the one because it's expensive to travel to like 5 different countries and auditioning 5 different times when you can just do it once. And I was preparing for this audition and the teacher that I had was organizing it. He wasn't judging it. He had zero influence on any of these directors. He kind of thought he did, but it wasn't really like any influence that he could tell the director, hey, choose her. It wasn't going to work that way. Um, so he was preparing me. And typically, what happens in an audition, because I've taken a few, especially for schools and for companies, you need to do the ballet class, so bar, center, and a variation, so like a little solo, so they can see your performance quality. Because you can see some performance quality in the class, but you don't really see it until they do a solo, perform a tiny bit. So I did not know, but he was preparing me for the audition technically to improve my technique, but he never told me that I needed to perform a solo in the audition. And it was a week before the audition, and I asked a friend of mine who I knew was also going to the audition. I was like, "Oh, are you preparing a solo?" And she said, "Yes, I am." And I thought, "Huh, I've known this teacher for so long. He's the teacher that's trained me from terrible to now good. Why is he not preparing me, even though he obviously knows the rules of the audition? He's never mentioned anything about this to me." And so I brought it up with him, and he told me, "Olyveya, you don't have the legs to perform a solo, legs as in like strength and stamina." And I thought, well, so then I'm paying you all this money and I'm training to work for a company, but if I don't have the legs to perform a solo, then what am I doing? And a solo to me is easier than corps de ballet. So his argument was, well, you're not going to be a principal dancer or a soloist anyway, so it wouldn't apply. And I thought, well, it's actually more difficult to be a corps de ballet because you're standing for like an hour in a position. And I've done that before. It's harder compared to a solo. And he had no response to that. So what he said was, well, you're a nanny, you live at home, and your parents are paying for this. And I said, well, actually, no, I'm paying for this with my own hard-earned money. And he was charging a lot. And so that was kind of it. And he just was like this, and he's like, get out. And I thought, wow. So that was my negative experience and the final end of that. I forget what your question initially was.
I mean, me too, but it was a good story. So I'm like, once we get to the end, I'm gonna have new questions. It
Yeah.
may have been from the beginning of like, what's the difference between a direct one and an overly aggressive teacher?
Yeah, so
But
that was more direct. But throughout that whole process, he would, oh yeah, so that was my point. He would make comments all the time throughout the class, such as, you don't have the proper leg shape. So no matter how skinny I got, because I got really skinny when I went back and did his summer course after I was carnivore for a good, I think it was like 6 months at that point. I got really skinny to a point where I was too skinny and I was not feeling good because I thought, oh, I just need to get skinnier and skinnier. Um, and he came up and he told me, Olyveya, you'll never have the body of a dancer, but what you have right now, we can kind of work with it. It just doesn't look good. And it was just like my physical structure. And I thought, I can understand that, yes, I would have to agree with that. I would have to work very hard on my technique so that it would look good with the body shape that I have. But it was all these like miniature comments. And I get it that I've dealt with a lot of different, because I've done a lot of different sports. There's a lot of harsh teachers that I've dealt with. It's not that I'm just like, oh my God, he's so mean, whatever. Um, it would get a lot worse than just those types of comments and things like that. So yeah, it was a lot of mind games. And he did this, I could watch him doing it throughout the summer courses because he mainly hosts summer intensives, and I could see him playing all these mind tricks with different girls. And I think a positive, so I like to try and take a positive out of all this negative experience. um, towards the end of it, I've always had a very large problem standing up and speaking out for myself. So in my most recent experience was I was able to break that. And then another thing is now I can recognize these terrible patterns and behaviors that people do, such as those horrible mind tricks, and just steer away from people who do that.
It makes me wonder if ballet is the kind of sport that can be more, like, is accepting the right word here, but ballet is very rigid for the kind of body types it wants. And now I can think of some very, very practical reasons for this. If somebody has to throw somebody else up in the air or catch them, it is significantly safer and easier to do that when they are both, well, when it's easier to do that. I know that there is some opening up in ballet in terms of different body shapes and body colors, but most of what I hear from people who are actually in it, it's very rigid. It's very competitive. It's really fucking hard on dancers. And I think you have to have such an internal love and passion for what you're doing for that to be greater than the negativity that you have to experience from the other people that are supposed to be teaching you, guiding you, leading you.
Yeah, and that's where I start to wonder, like, people who pursue it despite all of the negative response that they get. I wonder if it's a form of like coping mechanism. Like they do it because I can see how that could be the case. It's kind of like the I always forget what it's called. The oh my God. Um, Stockholm syndrome. There we go. I finally remembered it. I always go back to that, but I always forget what it's called. Stockholm syndrome. So I wonder if it's kind of like that, where they, for whatever reason, had a traumatic experience in their life, but ballet is kind of like something they hold on to. It makes them feel good when they do perform because they can express themselves in whatever way that they feel they need to be expressing. I don't know. Um, but then they have all that abuse behind it. So yeah, I don't know.
Is there something about the pain for you that is enticing or appealing or attractive? And when you're experiencing with yourself, not in something anybody else does to you, but the pain of, like, the first pair you point shoes. Like, I also have been wearing my point shoes, and I definitely do not have strong enough ankles to be doing this safely. You could not stop me from buying the point shoes once I had everything else. I was like, I'm putting them on. I'm putting them on. I didn't have them sewn with ribbons, nothing. I'm just like, doo, doo, doo. And my girlfriend was like, do not do that. You are really going to hurt yourself, Sam. You're going to stop yourself from doing ballet. So I don't wear them that often. And I honestly can't wear them for more than like 25 minutes because my feet are like, holy shit, people jump on these things. And yet, I like it. I really like the pain. In fact, if I'm in like a bit of a bad mood, putting on the point shoes and doing something that is requires a lot of focus, a lot of balance, a lot of concentration, it feels really good. I'm like, am I a bit of a sadist? Is that what that word is?
I think I would have to agree with that to like a certain extent. Yeah, like if the point shoes start to hurt after a long time, like after an hour or something, you just feel that like it feels good to feel that pain. But I think it's also, as weird as it sounds, it's a good thing to put yourself through that you can work through pain. You can work through different things. So I think it's good as a person to do certain things like that. It doesn't have to be ballet, it can be something else. To put yourself through these different things where you feel uncomfortable. I think it's great to get out of your comfort zone. And ballet definitely does that.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why ballet was such an attractive thing to me is is how hard it is. I wanted something that was going to be really hard, kind of painful. Okay, now also in our body graphs, you and I both have a defined ego. And what that means is we are here to prove that we can do certain things. 60% of the planet ish does not have this defined ego. They're not here to prove things. Those are the people that really suffer when they're, you know, these people are always trying to improve themselves so that they can get someone else's approval. You and I are going to be naturally self competitive. We compete with ourselves for our own approval to prove to ourselves that we are capable of certain things. And so I know like that's a little bit of where I get that pleasure in the pain from, is knowing like I can do this. I can get through this. And I can even do it with like a smile on my face, or whatever. But there's something very like personally empowering in that.
That is very true. Yeah, because I don't feel competitive. Like I've never felt competitive with my classmates or anything. It's just like, ugh, if I can't do that, or well, dang it, I could have left the point shoes on longer and done it better the last time or so. It's always, yeah, with myself. So that is 100% true.
Yeah, and it feels really good to compete with myself. Every day it's little things like I'll get my leg higher tomorrow. As long as my leg is higher tomorrow than it was today, fine. Good enough. That's all I'm really working for. Oh, okay. Well, around 45 minutes is kind of what I was hoping for. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good. Yeah.
Okay. Do you have anything you want to bring up?
Um, well, I'm just curious as to like the end goal of knowing that human design information. Like, is there any, based off of that, what guidance could you get knowing what you know about your own human design?
This is so fun. So all of the different people that are going to listen to this, if they're a generator type like you, then they're going to either have a response for the information or not. And in that, it gives them something to be attracted to and follow. So determination in human design, there are roughly 12 different, they're called diet types. I don't like the word diet. It implies that we have to restrict things. There are 12 different, I call them, let's go with nourishment types. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 2 variations of each one. Now you're one variation of a first color, and I'm one variation of a first color. Most people, when they come into human design, it's very mental in the beginning because there's so much new information to take in. But the point of the information is to get you into your body. It has to go through the mind first, but you pretty much want to dump it out of the mind as fast as you can. You want the body to orient itself to the correct life. Now, telling people that their first color determination, which is ultimately a caveman or primal or first person type diet, we're like our textbook information will include quotes like, if you crave salt, put salt on your tongue. Whereas most people are like, where's the salt and vinegar chips or something, like they go for the junky food kind of. So then you have this mental process of, I want salt. Well, am I really just supposed to put salt on my tongue? And when I first got this information, I was really angry about it because I come from a little bit more of a health background. Some of that included working in a health food store and selling supplements many years ago. And it made me angry in the sense like, well, if I'm just going to put salt on my tongue, then really this isn't a single ingredient diet. This is an elemental diet. So maybe I never have to eat again. I'm just going to go to the health food store and I'm going to buy zinc and I'm going to buy vitamin C and I'm going to buy. And so I was kind of like poking fun at how reductionist this could get. And when we feed the brain appropriately in human design, we're taught that you have up until about 7 for neural development. But because most of us are not raised according to our specific diet type, food, we're taught, is our number one homogenizing force. Food is our number one conditioning force across the planet. You're told how to eat as a little kid, and it is conditioned by how the family eats, not how the individual prefers to eat, unless you have very, very, very progressive parents. So we have this very original food conditioning, and the idea that, most of us are beyond 7 years old when we find this information. So there's this sadness of, great, I could have had neural growth until 7, but my parents probably shut it off around the age of 2 to 3 years old. They didn't necessarily know better, but I'm not going to be able to get that back. At best, I can decondition and detox to be somewhat close to as good as I got around the age of 3 years old. And so there's a very long unwinding to go back to your original diet type. And we also talk about 7-year cellular cycles. It takes a very long time to turn over all the cells in the body and the old conditioning that's in them. But people mentally want to make progress as fast as they can. So you take someone who's a month into human design and they barely know enough about their body graph, but they're like, oh, The word diet, I'm programmed to recognize the word diet is something I should want to go after. And I'm still programmed to think if I look a certain way, my life will get easier. So I'm going to use this diet information to control how I look so I can control all these other things, which is not a part of human design. It's still normal people playing in human design. They haven't integrated the information yet. So hopefully, after 7 years, you're deconditioned enough that your relationships have changed, your environment has changed, your work has changed, and all of those things around you changing change the way that you're now nourishing yourself, feeding yourself. And hopefully, you've wound back the clock to get yourself as close as you can to your original diet type. And so I spent a couple of years like forcing myself to buy like a bag of peas and eat the bag of peas when that's not what I wanted. And it made me feel like shit because one ingredient at a time. And so your content was really fascinating because I could tell right away that you were a first color, but you didn't go through the whole process of finding design, finding the information, trying to trick yourself into it faster. You did it through the body led process, which is the way that we want everyone to do it. And so your value is in having done the experiment naturally by trusting yourself. And that's the point of human design, teaching each person to trust whatever their inner, so your inner authority is your sacral center, what you have a response for in the moment. So we want each person to trust that. So ultimately, I should know the answer to my own questions, which is you followed a response to eliminate the right foods and to start consuming the ones that were better for you. And so a lot of what you've provided for my listener is your experience, your process, the fact that it was natural, you could trust yourself enough to let it happen. It did yield you results that I want people to know about. Um, there's there was a lot of good stuff that came out of this.
I'm glad to hear. Yeah, because it just made me think like when I was younger, I have an older sister. She loved processed foods just because we never really got any access to junk because we weren't eating that. And I just naturally didn't like it. And I never really understood why, and that would make total sense. I just don't. And even when I would consume it, it just felt, I don't know, I just didn't really love to do it, or it just felt like I was just eating it because my friends were eating it or something. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
I find that being a first color, when we eat food that isn't like whole ingredient, we end up eating way more food than we should because, if you have to eat 1,000 calories just to get 100 good quality ones, what else am I supposed to do with those other 900 calories in my body? My body will not function with those very well. We don't do process, but you also can't, like, people can't just jump into, even without coming from the human design side, you probably would give the same advice. If you're a normal, everyday junk food, takeout kind of eater, you're not going to just jump to the diet that you have and assume it's going to feel really good in the first couple days.
Yeah, no, no, that's what I did. That was not fun. You don't do that, no.
I haven't asked you. You said multiple times animal foods, and it did make me go, "What about?" So, what is your relationship to fruits and veggies?
So I experimented for, I think it was like a month of eating a tiny little piece of fruit at nighttime because some people said if they have problems sleeping to regulate your blood sugar. Some people just say they just have excess energy. I think it's just a blood sugar regulation issue. So I would have a small piece of fruit before going to sleep, and I didn't really love it. I didn't feel great, and I've started just having raw milk instead, which would also have a small content of carbs, which is what would be regulating your blood sugar, and that feels a lot better. As for vegetables, I've always hated them. My mom would tell me you need to finish your vegetables before you get any other food like meat or whatever else. So yeah, I've never liked them, and I've thought, oh well, once I heal, I can include them again. I'm like, I don't know what I would want to eat. I don't, yeah, so I just don't naturally want to eat them. Like even if I saw like a carrot or something, like I don't know. I used to love this one pepper salad, but like now that I think about it and I can really remember the taste, I still am not. I don't know. I wouldn't bother to go out of my way to make it or eat it.
Interesting, because yeah, when I think about most vegetables, I get cold and it feels like it's too much effort.
Yeah.
Like it's like me chewing this raw vegetable. I'm like, I do not have the right insides for whatever this like. Celery juice is one of the closest ways I get to, and also I don't want to chew it. I don't want to have to go through
Yeah.
the process of eating it. And I bought a really good juicer because when I did want to do some juices, single ingredient, it is impossible to buy fresh pressed juice that doesn't have like 3 to 8 different ingredients because they're trying to shove so many different things in there. But my body only does one at a time. Like I just want apple, I just want celery. And even, yeah, I'm like, I like warm kale. I don't know, like very rarely,
Yeah.
but I'm a bit of a fruit junkie. I might have a bit of a sugar problem, especially when you were talking about the nighttime thing. I'm like, this is a spot I could definitely do better. I tend to get quite snacky, like immediately before bed. I might have to try your glass of milk suggestion.
Yeah, my only issue with carbs of any kind, whether it's coming from fruit or dairy, is that it actually just makes you hungry. So I don't know if that would really help. But what helps instead is to fill yourself on proteins and eating enough fat throughout the day. And then at nighttime, I'll just have the milk because I think, okay, well, it's just going to help me sleep. And because I exercise so much, I want to have the calcium, whatever other good bacteria is in there and whatnot. But yeah, that might just make you hungry.
Is it hard for you to find raw milk?
No, now that I'm in Utah, there's a store and they have a whole three refrigerators full of raw milk. So yeah, now it's easy.
All right. If I make my way down to Utah in the next year, do you want to hang out?
Definitely, yeah.
Very
Yeah,
cool.
definitely.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, well, I think let's wrap it up here, and I would love if you would leave information where people can find you. What's your socials?
Sure. Well, my socials at the moment, until I change them, are Carnivore Ballerina. I'm planning to change it to just my name because I have not found another person who spells her name the way I use my name, so that username is not taken. So it's just Olyveya, Olyveya, and that will hopefully be all of my platforms.
Well, thank you for coming. Again, Olivia is a 2,4 mg with alternating determination, and I'm really grateful that you came to talk. You were awesome.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.